The very initial genesis of Recloaking Papatūānuku was when we found out that essentially New Zealand was going to have to spend billions of dollars, potentially tens of billions of dollars, buying carbon credits internationally to meet our sovereign commitments around the climate. And we thought that's just nuts. We wanted to find a way to deliver those commitments in the most environmentally responsible way, but also in the most economically rational way. The beauty of Recloaking Papatūānuku is if we invest in it to deliver the biodiversity benefits, the carbon benefits, we get this extraordinary dividend of resilience.
Recloaking Papatūānuku, there's just so many boxes that it ticks. There's water quality, there's soaking up carbon, there is improving biodiversity, and there is also dealing with floods, the future extreme weather events we're going to get through climate change. Native forests are expensive to set up and to maintain. You've got weeds and you've got pests. All that's expensive, and so there has to be money that comes from somewhere to fund this.
When you look at what it takes to restore our forests, but also to replant indigenous species at the scale that we're talking about, how do you fund that extraordinary work? We think there is absolutely a role for the public sector. Much of this needs to be done on the conservation estate. You need the government, but we're not going to do it without the innovation and the capital and the resources of the private sector. We also think there's a very significant role for New Zealand farmers to play. You need iwi. They have kaitiakitanga over these lands, they've got insight, they've got wisdom. And we need philanthropy. Sometimes the timeframes are longer than the public sector or the private sector would normally look to in terms of generating a return, and philanthropy is prepared to, as it were, close that gap. I think there are some barriers standing in the way. The number one, I don't think we are taking our commitments as seriously as we should around the environment.
Treasury argues that meeting these nationally determined contributions is voluntary. It's not written in law, so we could potentially renege. If we are truly serious about meeting this 2030 target, then certainly it should be a liability on the government's accounts.
We need to provide certainty about the level and the boldness of the commitments that we're going to deliver. We can't keep switching from the left to the right and saying, they might be real, they might not be real. What we're dealing with in climate change is very real. If we acknowledge it, if we get on with it, we can deliver against that in a very economically rational way with integrity. Now, the with integrity pieces is quite important because I do think some of the carbon accounting leads you to a world that is divorced from reality. We end up having the situation where we do silly short-term things to try and meet the accounting, but we don't step back and actually look at the reality of what we're actually doing. And even I look at things like lock up Pinus radiata as an example around the climate change commitments. That might make a short-term difference, but in many respects you would argue it creates an even bigger problem longer term.
There's going to be a big discussion in the future about what our climate targets should be and what our contribution should be to that. There's every opportunity for New Zealand to put up something like Recloaking Papatūānuku as part of our long-term contribution to the climate change problem that solves many other problems at the same time.
We think there's an opportunity also for New Zealanders to organise in ways that we haven't done as much before. A lot of things that have gone on in New Zealand are wonderful people doing wonderful mahi, but it doesn't add up to a scale that is able to attract some of the international opportunities that are available to actually fund many of these things. We've often looked to government and the regulatory market to be able to participate. But I have most optimism around the voluntary carbon markets and some of the voluntary nature markets that are emerging. But when you look at the scale of those markets and what they're not wanting to buy onesies or twosies. They actually want at-scale aggregated offerings.
There's a growing recognition around the world that climate and nature have to be dealt with together. Because what we've seen in New Zealand with, monoculture pine, those sorts of issues have appeared elsewhere in the world too. So people are realising that you need to deal with these issues together. New Zealand has a massive opportunity here because we're small and we have relationships. We can come together at a regional level, a catchment level, ideally. We can identify what's the most valuable biodiversity, what's the most valuable thing you can do for water quality, what's the most valuable thing you can do for flood protection. If we can bring those together as a package at a catchment level, that is a really saleable proposition to the world, and that's the direction that other countries are going in.
We're looking at what many farmers are doing around riparian replanting, around wanting to actually have more of a mixed farming model. Farmers know, every bit of land that they have is different, and that, some of it is suited to dairying, some of it's suited to sheep and beef, but actually some of it is best suited to being replanted in natives. Can we give farmers a superpower to be able to do that collectively at scale? When we also look at what a lot of community groups, a lot of iwi groups have done around catchments, we're saying, can we provide the funding, can we provide the platform to enable them to come together, that we could actually make these genuinely sustainable business models and revenue streams going forward?
There are incredible new technologies that are coming on stream that are going to allow us to monitor and measure a lot of this stuff much better than we have done in the past. And that makes the whole future of carbon and nature markets really interesting. But they're just not going to be at the scale that we need to achieve what we need to achieve here. We're going to need a funding source that can generate millions, ultimately billions of dollars to plough into Recloaking Papatūānuku. I think the ideal solution here is reforming the emissions trading scheme, ideally even taking forestry right out of the emissions trading scheme. Anyone who follows the emissions trading scheme will in recent years have seen that the government hasn't been able to sell any units because there's this flood of forestry credits coming into the scheme, and that's only going to get worse in the future. There's some complexities here about exactly how you take forestry out of the emissions trading scheme and what sort of rights you give to the people who've already got their forests within the scheme. But making some assumptions about how you do that, we've done some modelling which suggests that it would generate a whole lot of auction revenue for the government to invest into a scheme that really put the right tree in the right place.
We do need to do research and development into giving native trees the same leg up, the same advantage that we've given to exotics over the years. We actually need to build a supply chain that enables those trees to be distributed, planted, and looked after in ways that we do with exotic forestry, to be able to really deal with not just thousands of trees or tens of thousands of trees, but millions of, tens of millions of trees that we need to plant going forward.
So now what for government? Ideally, we would take forestry out of the ETS, we'd let the carbon price rise, the auctions would start clearing, and we'd have money to invest in this sort of thing. And we'd suggest setting up a scheme which encourages local areas to work out where the best place to recloak Papatūānuku is across climate, water, biodiversity, floods, all that sort of stuff. To do that, you need good information. There's a lot of information out there in companies, farmers, mātauranga Māori, a lot of different research institutions that have done things. Community groups have an awful lot of information that needs to be shared. This is a classic role for government, to provide a platform that can bring all of this information together in a way that is secure for everyone involved, so we take care of the privacy issues, but allows us to share that information and all learn from it.
One of the reasons that I'm so passionate about recloaking Papatūānuku, when the mahi is done, And when you look at the way New Zealand forests recover, it is just extraordinary. They are unbelievably resilient when you give them half a chance. So I'm passionate about the magic of New Zealand forests and the way they respond, but I'm also have got an incredible sense of urgency. We don't have much time left to give our forests that even break. We have to act, and we have to act now.